Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week we are doing something I've been looking forward to for a while, and that is patching in the patina. All right, guys, well, have you ever been in a meeting madly trying to take notes and realized that you've forgotten half of what was said? Me neither, because I'm a hermit and I just talk to myself in the garage all day. But some of you definitely do work in this sort of field, and this is sort of how I imagine meetings are.
Welcome to the meeting, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about raising productivity. Blah, 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 blah.
Yes, definitely.
Making targets. Blah, 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 blah.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Blah, 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 blah. Profits.
But some of you do work in those environments, and that is where there is a all-in-one note-taking solution, the Plaud Note. Aha! So the Plaud Note is credit card size, so it can attach straight to your phone or go straight in your wallet, so you can take it anywhere. Just press the button and it captures the entire meeting completely hands-free. Now, once the meeting's over, that is where the magic happens.
So to test it, I set it down to record a recent Frankenholler video.
You get a word-for-word transcription of the entire meeting, including speaker labeling, so you know who was saying what in the meeting. And if you want a summary of the entire meeting to send to a colleague, you can just get Plaud to do the entire summary for you.
Jeff, I want a full summary of that meeting on my desk in 5 minutes.
It instantly turns your conversations into structured notes, extracting key takeaways, decisions, and action items. No more listening to a 2-hour meeting just to find one or two little details. And it gets even better. With the Ask AI feature, you can go back to previous recordings and find information from there, turn a summary into a to-do list, or even get key topics for you. Plaud Note is more than just a gadget. It is a productivity tool that saves time and boosts your efficiency. So stop getting bogged down with messy notes and start concentrating on what really matters. So if the Plaud Note sounds good to you, there's a link down in the description. Head over, say goodbye to note-taking forever, and I'm going to get back to the build. All right, guys, welcome back. And if you've been following along, you know that this is the Frankenholler, my 1954 Ford F600 truck cab that is on a Toyota Coaster bus chassis. And if you missed it last week, I got the whole front end bolted on, the doors on, and it's actually starting to really look like what it is going to look like, which I am very excited about. If you missed it, I'll put a link up above so you can catch up. And as always, do the things, comment, subscribe, like, get videos, all that sort of stuff. It all really does help out that crazy algorithm. So a couple of notes from last week. The main one that I asked you guys was, is it possible to run the power off of one battery? And I basically, as you pointed out, answered my own question that if I did run the 12-volt circuits off of one of the 12-volt batteries and not the other, I would potentially run into issues of a charging imbalance because it's trying to charge them both at 24 volts. And I potentially get one charging at 14, one at 10. And basically it would kill battery life. If it was just the window washer, with how infrequently it gets used, it probably wouldn't be an issue, but I've already ordered a 24 volt to 12 volt DC to DC converter that can do 30 amps. So that should be able to do the stereo circuit, any of the little 12 volt circuits I want to run. That's the easiest way. I just was curious to know. So yes, that is the way I'm going to go. Next thing, just on the coolant circuit and how I mentioned that my heater hose is above my radiator. There were lots of comments about putting a bleeder up the top. The issue is that most of them are just, it's plumbing it in that's going to be more of annoyance basically because it will, I basically have to add a tube out here in the bleeder, and then it's sort of going to look even uglier than it already does. So I'm happy enough to just run the longer radiator filler neck and prop it up when I have to fill up the radiator. But for how infrequently that's going to be, hopefully it shouldn't be a big issue, and I'll sort it out that way. So that is all good. And just one last one on the enamel paint that I used to paint. I painted the chassis of the truck with it and all of my bits and pieces. Some asked why I don't use a powder coating oven, seeing as I've got all this other stuff set up. Powder coating is hard wearing, but I find that this enamel is super hard wearing. I've been climbing over this chassis, stepping over it backwards and forwards, using it as a ladder, using it as a stepping stone for the last 12 months or so, and it's still in great condition. It's still so hard that it's very good. Powder coat is often leaves a much thicker build up. It can fill in bolt holes and things like that. And this is about as quick and easy as it gets. This is my black enamel gun, and I leave it full all the time. I haven't emptied this in 12 months. It's still liquid. Sometimes it dries out a little bit and I need to add a little bit of thinners in there. Sometimes the tip gets a little bit crusty, but I just leave this all the time set up. It's an old gun, just used for that. Plug it in, give it a spray, move on. Perfect solution for coating these parts. All right, and now comes time for the fun bit, and I need to go through and start matching in where I've done repairs to the patina on this old truck. It is staying a patina truck. There are many people who are upset about that, which you can do your truck however you like. For me, this is going to live outside. It is going to get beaten up. The panels don't fit great. They fit okay, but nothing amazing. And it would be weeks and weeks and weeks of sanding and realigning panels and all that sort of stuff to get a perfect paint job that I don't want. It's going to live outside, and if one of my mates' cars break down, I'm going to be like, take the truck. It is just, that is what sort of vehicle it's going to be. So it's going to have a very nice, clean, neat interior and a very crusty exterior, exactly the way I want it. So what will also trigger some of you is I am going to be matching in patina and even adding a bit more paint in places as the front end is just rust. I would like to have a little bit more paint on there. And some of you might see that as cringe, the faux patina, but it's what I like, and I'm building a truck for me, so that's what we're going to do. So what I've done is, before I even started this job, I went through and took a bunch of close-up photos of the detail of the sides of this truck, and I want to recreate patina where I've damaged it, but also add a little bit here and there to make it feel like it's still an old truck, but I will be sealing it in and making it sort of protected. So let's get into it. And the first thing is, I think we need to start mixing up some paint colors. If we have a close look at the side of the truck, you can actually see the different layers of paint used here. So the original color of the truck is actually torch red. So you can just see a little bit of it poking out between the guards here. And that red color is the original top color of the truck. But then you've also got this sort of white hue, which I think was a bit of a primer. And you've also got this primer color here, this red oxide primer. To add to that, you've got these tiny little sort of brown splotches and then almost some yellow coming off of it. So there's lots of bits. You can sort of see how rust has made these trickle down marks and things like that. And I like this visual representation of the life of the truck. So what I want to do now is start mixing up some of these colors to recreate that image where I have removed it and repaired it. And to recreate that, I've got a bunch of different colors that I've got together here. So I've got some yellow ochre, I've got that light red oxide primer color. I've got deep black, I've got white, and I've also got some mixed up the original torch red that the truck was. Now, none of these are going to work straight out of the tin. They're going to be far too bright and vibrant for what is currently on the truck. The truck has been living outside probably its entire life, and it's now over 70 years old. So that is a lot of fading. So we're going to have a bit of a play and see if we can mix up some of these colors and match them and get them reasonably close to what is there.
So here I start mixing the colors, and basically what I'm doing here is sitting next to the truck, adding a little bit of color a bit at a time to try and get something that matches in close. Now, the best way to do it is to actually dab a little bit of the color onto the existing paint, and you'll really get a better idea of whether it's close or not. So here I'm just getting a rough idea by holding it close, but once I paint it on, then it will become a little bit clearer how close I am or how far off I am. So first of all, I did the cream color. As you can see here, I'm now working on that red oxide primer, and that's looking pretty good. Then we move over and start working on the red. Now, I do have the original torch red, but this red is faded, so it needs some tweaks to match.
All right, so I have my colors mixed up, or the main ones that I need, and I'm gonna have to do some more playing around when I get there, but I've got my main three colors that I want. Now, the front of this truck is just rust. Now, this surface rust is actually a reasonably stable surface. It protects itself with its own oxide, so it's not likely to create a rust hole all the way through. A rust hole is very different, but this over the surface is actually reasonably sustained, and hence why it's survived outside for 70 years. But what I want to do now is I'm going to go over and I'm going to clean everything, clean the whole exterior of the truck, get it nice and tidy, so then we can start adding back to it again.
So here I'm going over the entire truck with some car wash and a red Scotch-Brite to really rough up the surface and clean off any of the gunk that's built up over time. Try and knock off the top of any of that sort of surface rust and really just start with a reasonably nice clean surface. Now, it's not like my usual paint jobs where it would be bare metal. This is oxidized metal, and I'm happy with that. Then give the entire truck a quick rinse, just making sure I have cleaned up every single part of the surface of the truck. Now I go over the entire truck with a blower and a dry rag to make sure it's totally dry and there's no water that's going to get blown out from any of the crevices when I start to paint.
All right, now I'm just having a look, and I have never actually filled this little gap along here. Now, it looks like it originally had some lead in that gap. I'm going to sand it back and put some body filler in there to seal it in and make sure that it is all nice and watertight, and then when I paint over the top, it should stop anything leaking through later.
So I went along and sanded all the way along the edge, and after a bit of thought I realised I don't want body filler in there. I'm not trying to get this flat, and the ideal thing is something flexible, and I realised I've got some windscreen sealant, so that is what I'm using in this gap. It's perfect on this sort of metal location, and it's flexible enough to fill in the gap and make sure I don't get any leaks later on. Then it's going around, and you can see all these little bits where the POR 15 has leaked through when I painted that on the underside of all these panels. So I'm using a razor blade now to scratch it all off to make a relatively clean surface to paint onto. Anywhere it won't come off easily, it's obviously stuck well, and I just leave it.
All right, so I don't have an exact plan of how I'm going to move forward with this, But I thought I would try, first of all, with this little section in here. So what I'm going to get first, I'm going to get the red oxide primer, because that seems to be the bottom level. It seems to be raw steel, red oxide primer, sort of this creamy white primer, and then the red color, which there's very little left of, was the process on the truck. So I'm going to use the red oxide primer first in the airbrush, and I'm just going to airbrush in this section and get a little bit of coverage over these spots, just so that I've got a base to start working up from.
So this is my very first go at painting patina. So you can see here I'm putting the red oxide primer over my old etch primer patches, and then it's time to start making it match. So what I've got here is I've got that cream color, and I've got an old paintbrush that I'm just dipping it in and just wiping off most of the paint so it's dry, and using a dry brush to do that, and just matching in a few bits with the airbrush.
All right, so that step worked quite well, and now I've done my test. I'm going to step things up and start actually patching in a lot of these areas in a bigger way. You can see here I use a little bit of airbrush and a bit of dry brushing to get that effect. I'm going to move on now, and I'm going to put the red oxide primer and the spray gun, and I'm going to go around and I'm going to sort of dust in a bunch of places where I'm going to start adding a little bit more paint to the vehicle. Yes, places like up here and the bonnet where it is just rust, I want to have some paint. I am going to leave places where there's just rust, but it is going to be clear coated over the top, so it's going to be sort of locked in. But we're going to go through now and just start blowing in areas, dusting things in, and just building up some sort of base that I can continue to add to.
So you can see here the red oxide primer covers things up very quickly, just getting rid of those little grey bits and the bits that don't match in. Just the red oxide primer makes it match in so much better. You can see here all the way along the back of the cab was replaced, so that's all got to be matched in, and everywhere where I did a patch, a bit of red oxide primer doesn't hurt. Now the bonnet and the front guards were basically just rust. Everything had faded off of it, and I'd like to add a little bit more paint, but the paint generally wears off of the horizontal surfaces first where the water sits for longer, so I'm just going to add paint to the vertical surfaces.
All right, I have gone through and done all the patches everywhere I needed to. I've added a little bit more primer color on here. I've left a bit of rust. I've left the top of the bonnet. I haven't touched that. There is actually this weird, I don't know whether somebody graffitied it or there was something on here a long time ago where they used this to paint something else on a farm. That's all staying. That's all part of the history of the truck. I just wanted to add a little bit more paint in places rather than it being just rust. So you can see all the primer all the way around, and all the way around the bottom here, all the way around the bottom at the back. I've got the primer on. Then I've got to go through and add in the white and then add in the red. So let's start building it up, and I think next bit is going to be this white primer now. All right, so now I've gone back. I've got my cream color in the airbrush. Now, those who are interested, I've used these airbrushes for a long time. This is basically, I used an Iwata HPC back in the day. For those who don't know, I used to be a professional airbrush artist for 13 years and did lots of car magazines back in the Sec Spec era. I airbrushed a lot for many, many years. So this is not new to me, although I've never actually done patina before. So this is all a bit of an experiment. I find these are good. I think this is actually a cheap Chinese copy of that airbrush, but this is what I've always preferred. I'm going to go through now and just sort of add in bits. I'll airbrush some. I'm going to try a few different methods, so let's give it a go.
So I'm using this cream sealer color first and going over all of the red oxide primer, or most of it anyway, but it only has to be thin because some of it is, in theory, all faded off anyway, and that is the effect that I'm going for. So again, at the moment, it just sort of looks a bit dodgy, and I'm going on here with some dry brush, just randomly putting a bit of paint on around the place, and this obviously at the moment looks very odd and not like patina in one little bit. So again, this is my first attempt at doing any of this, and here I'm using the edge of a bit of Scotch-Brite, just sort of dipped in the paint. This time it's the red oxide primer, to sort of blend in some of this cream colour I've used. I realise some of the cream is not quite solid enough, so I added a bit more, and then this is that yellow ochre sort of mix that gives that rustier look, and I'm just sort of swinging with the airbrush and just tinging the edges. Now I've come back with a darker colour again, so this is actually my little spots of rust, and I'm just using the edge again of a bit of Scotch-Brite to add that in, and just working backwards and forwards, and you can already see it's starting to look more like an old rusty panel rather than just something with some weird random paint on it. And a lot of this I'm just doing by eye. So I'm looking at the cowl panel of the truck, which has obviously some natural patina to it, and I'm trying to get something close-ish to that. So backwards and forwards, a little bit of dry brush, wherever I just sort of need some bits and pieces, trying to keep it looking nice and random, all in the effect to get it to look like it's as old as it is. So you can see me just adding in a few darker little bits here and there just to make blemishes on the panel.
Alright, so when I started this front guard, I was not happy with it at all. And as I worked forward on it and got better and better, it's actually, look, I think it's turned out pretty good. I think I can tell that it's painted. But when you compare it to this is natural, and parts of this is natural, and then parts of this is painted, and it's there's bits in this corner here that are painted. I think it's actually done quite a decent job of blending the different areas together and looking like patina. Now, some of you are going to hate it, but I think I'm going to run with it. So I'm going to do the same sort of treatment now around the sort of the front edges of the bonnet. I think it sort of needs a little bit, just a light little dappling around here, and a little bit around here, and a little bit on this this guard here, to sort of match in with what else we've got going on. So that is what I'm going to move on to next, is doing the rest of the front area and see if I can blend this all in.
So my trial section went reasonably well, so I'm trying to match it all in along the sides and the front of the bonnet, and also on the passenger front guard.
Alright, so I'm starting out the same way as I started out on the front of this guard. I've used this creamy colour. I ended up, the original colour I mixed up, it was too white, so I ended up actually having to put a bit more black and sort of make it duller. The white was far too bright a white, and it needed to be greyed off quite a lot because the white, yellow, cream colour on the truck is very faded. So that's basically what I've done to start with, is I've just sort of done some rough painting on there just to sort of get a base of where I'm going to start. And then the next step is I've got a piece of nasty old sponge, and I have the mixed up, this is the red oxide primer colour, and I'm just going to sponge it around the edges like I've done here, so that it's just sort of, the colour just sort of comes through, but it's still just sort of hidden underneath. That's sort of what I'm going for to start with, and try and dull this off a bit, and make it blend in and look a little more natural than it currently does. So I squeeze it out so that I've just got a damp sponge, and I'm just going around and dabbing it in places.
So the sponge is actually a very effective tool in this case, just using the red oxide primer around the edges of my brush strokes so that it doesn't look like I've used brush strokes. It's all about making it look random. Believe it or not, it's actually surprisingly difficult to make something look totally random. Then I move on to using some of the yellow oxide to start adding in that rust look.
Now I've got this very dark, almost black rust color. I'm using a bit of Scotch Brite, and I'm just going to put a little bit onto this and just sort of hit it in little spaces to sort of try and add a bit of rust spots in around this place. And it just seems to give it at those little tiny highlights that sort of makes it be a rusty spot. I don't know.
Extremely well articulated there, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to imply. Adding those little tiny bits in, and I'm just sort of blending out bits and then adding in that yellow oxide, and you can see I'm sort of making little bits where the rust has run down from those bits over years. Really trying to give it the image that it's sat outside and the rain and weather has just beaten it up and it's trickled down over the edges of the bonnet. And all of this is just going backwards and forwards with the same sort of 3 or 4 colours, just trying to rough things up and make it look more and more like random beaten up old rusty panels. So as you can see, I just was not happy with it, and I added a whole bunch more of the creamy base coat colour, and I'm going at it again. I just can't leave well enough alone. I'm just working backwards and forwards at it, using the exact same techniques each time, just until I've got something that feels like a natural rusty panel. Or at least that's what I hope.
All right, so standing back and looking at it, I think it works. I think that the bonnet and the front guard, I think that works. I think it looks like it was originally there. I think that is being good. Now, I've still got more to do down the bottom. I've got to blend that in where I've done repairs. I've just sort of flicked a little bit of black on there at the moment, or a little bit of the darker color, but there's more to do on that. But all of this, I think it works. I think it matches in. I think it sort of flows in with what's going on here. They usually have a break. For some reason, most of the trucks I've seen, the cabs don't fade as quickly as the bonnets and the guards. The bonnets maybe because of the heat under the bonnet and things like that. I wanted to have a go at matching patina and making my own patina without it looking like I've just sprayed something on and sanded back little patches, which is what it usually looks like. So yeah, I think this is working not too bad. So next thing, let's get in and we'll finish off the bottom of this front edge, particularly as we've got some red that needs to be blown in there as well.
So besides these areas where I repaired it and I have repainted that red oxide primer over, you can see that the original red is still sitting there right down at the bottom. It was probably protected by the bumper that was on there. So I want to recreate this same look where I had to patch that lower valance. And thankfully I've got enough here to sort of use as a reference, and you can see I'm going backwards and forwards and sort of trying to darken up the top, and I'm still not exactly happy with what I've added so far because the yellow oxide primer looks oddly orange and it's not bright enough in spots, and it just doesn't have that almost sunset type gradient that the original part does.
So I keep going away, I keep coming back, I keep playing with it, I can't leave it alone. I'm still torn as to how much I like it or not. I think it does blend, but I'm trying to make it look more and more realistic. So I've been going back with the airbrush, I've been going back with bits of sandpaper to sort of try and sand it, to try and get that sort of look like it's sort of weathered and worn, and the water has just sort of run over it over many years and just sort of killed the paint a little bit, like we have on the sides of the cab over here. And it's really coming together. So I'm going to head back down now. I wasn't happy with the front bar, so as you saw, I've added a bit more paint down there. It's all about just continually working it up. So I'm going to keep adding a bit more down the bottom, and then we'll get on, and we need to still do the back of the cab.
So like I mentioned, the first time around, I wasn't happy with how bright the center of this panel was when I first did it. So I'm coming back again and layering things up, and I've got that nice bright crisp white line in the center, which I'm going to gradually fade down with the airbrush and some sponges, and you can see it's starting to match in better and better with each little step. Using this really dark rust look, that just very lightly speckling that on really makes it look a lot more realistic, and this is really starting to look like that original part underneath the driver's headlight.
All right, so I've just got to stop and leave the front alone. I keep going backwards and forwards, but I think that is now good. What I'm going to tackle now is the back. So you can see here I already sort of blew in the red oxide primer color, but what I need to come back with now is this sort of creamy undercoat and then the red. Obviously, if I try to paint the red straight over it, red is much more transparent. So that is why that creamy undercoat is there. They would have painted that on to give it a base so that you get that bright red color. And that's what I'm going to do now. So I'll do a little bit of light masking down here, and then sort of start spraying in the cream and red, and then we'll start adding in a bit of the patina.
So another beauty of doing this patina is I don't have to go crazy masking everything. There's a tiny little bit of masking here just to stop a little bit of overspray, but I'm not spraying thick solid coats of paint onto the truck because it's supposed to be faded and mostly worn off, so that makes my life a lot easier there. And here you can see I used that cream base coat and then the red, but the red is far too bright at the moment. As you can see, it does not match in. So I'm going through now with a bit of Scotch-Brite, and I'm just adding in some little scratches and stuff while the paint is still wet to make it look like the cab is scuffed and beaten up.
All right, so to start with, you can sort of see that I've gone through and I've scuffed up the paint. Some places where it was wet and I've done these sort of scuffs, other places where it was mostly dry and I scuffed it with the Scotch-Brite to sort of blend it in a little bit. And there's sort of scuffs along where it gets bumped. So you can see that there's sort of bump marks here where the back of the cab was bumped. So I'm just adding bits in there. A lot of this bottom part of the cab won't be seen because the tray's going to be over it. It's going to be all covered. But when I flip the tray up and things, you know, it still needs to be done. And I'm just working my way over it. You can also see over this side how down the bottom I've already sort of scuffed it in and it already blends in quite nicely. So I'm going to go through now and add in some things like some of these scratches and stuff like that. So I'm going to get the airbrush out and maybe a fine paintbrush and just paint in some of these things, airbrush in some of these things, really start getting it feeling like an old beaten up rusty area that matches in with the rest of the truck.
So because the back of the cab has a different feel to the rest of the truck, you can see here I've got a very fine little paintbrush and I'm going around and just painting on random little squiggles around the place, which are tiny scratches and chips to mimic what is higher up on the truck. You can also see I'm using some of the shape that's there. So there's bits where you can see the welding lines and I am highlighting them because that is where realistically this would rust first. So I'm trying to sort of embrace the damage that is already there to enhance it and make it again look more realistic. But at the moment it just looks like little dark squiggles, but I will come back to it in a minute and really start blending it in.
All right, so you can see we've got these rust spots up here of the real old patina, and you can see what I've sort of done here. I've sort of just randomly painted little bits on around the place of basically sort of chipped rust spots to start with. Now, at the moment, it just looks like weird squiggles on the paint. If we move around, you can see the chips down here, and then I've added sort of extra chips down further down. Those sort of hide in reasonably well. Moving over here, again, some more chips and sort of scuffs. I got some Scotch-Brite and I just sort of rubbed through the paint a little bit in sections, sort of trying to match in with what's sort of going on up above. And there's some few bits where I've missed, just done little patches and little spots and little chips and bits and pieces. Again, a bit of scuffing on the bottom of the door because obviously from here down was replaced, so you can sort of see the weld line there. I've highlighted the weld line in a few spots. So now I'm going to come back in with the airbrush and airbrush around these to sort of try and make them look a little bit more like the rust is dripping off like this here, and just make it look like it is a bit old and weathered using that color.
So here you can get a really good view of how I turn those weird brown squiggles with a bit of the yellow ochre airbrush to really make it look like there is the rust dripping down. And I've got the perfect reference just above of the real rusted areas, and I'm just trying to fade that whole area, get rid of that stark white and blow in a little bit of that yellow oxide. Really makes it feel like the rust has dripped down over many years, and it sort of just all blends in with what was there originally.
That is really starting to look the business. So we have real and we have mine. Now I just need to do a little bit more work with maybe the darker brown airbrushing, but that is really looking like Patina truck, particularly when you get back from it, it all just blends in together and looks like I want it to. I'm very happy with that.
Now the back has less damage, so it's actually a lot quicker and easier to blend it all in. Just adding in those few little scratches around the place and then trying to dust in and fade out that bright red.
All right, I am over the moon with that. That just looks right now. It just matches in nicely. It is exactly what I was looking for. As far as across the back goes, again, it just matches in. It looks like I wanted it to. It just looks like it was still originally that way, and that's just what it is. Round this corner, again, it's all just sort of matching in nicely. There's the original up above, and then down below, it all just sort of matches in nicely. All right, so the rest of the truck is looking fantastic. The last bit I need to tackle is the grille. I've left it till now. There's lots of little spots around where the POR that I painted on the underside of it had leaked through that I didn't notice, which has obviously ruined it because I really love the patina of this this front grille. So first thing I'm going to do, I've got a razor blade. I'm going to go around and see how much of the POR I can scrape off before I start trying to just basically match in what was here. Obviously there was a rust repair on the front here as well. So let's scrape off the POR 15 and then go back and see what we can do about building it back up again and making it just look like it did.
So back out with a razor blade and scratching off all of that leaked out POR 15 from the back of this panel. So if you hadn't followed previously, the back of all of these panels are all painted and all protected nicely. It is just the front that I want to look like patina. Even the inside of the truck I have repaired and is going to be extremely nice and neat. It's just the outside that's going to look old. And here I've got some cream color that I am blowing in and matching in with the front of the truck. But again, it's too crisp and bright at the moment, and that is something I need to rectify. So now I'm coming back with the sponge and a bit of that rusty sort of red oxide, adding that in a little bit with the airbrush and just gradually adding more and more of that sort of natural feeling rust back in along the places where it would get damaged and rust, like all the ridges and the seams.
All right, well, we have a truck that is re-patinaed. Now, this is probably going to be one of the more controversial episodes. I'm still not sure on the front of the truck. That's definitely my least favorite part. But all of the sides and this sort of area, that looks exactly like it was there. I don't think anybody not knowing would ever pick that. Being blended in again across the back, I am totally happy with that. Obviously, the bottom half has all been repainted, but the top part is all the same, and it all just matches and looks fine. Coming around to the passenger side, and the corner is all looking like it should. So this is real, and then going down here, this is not. So it's all matched in. I think it blended in quite nicely. That's all blended in all the way around, and then we've got the front guard, etc. And of course, the grille is now all matched back in again, and yeah, that's looking really good. Actually, I just noticed I still haven't blown in that bit air. I just airbrushed it up, and the rest of it is all just looking like an old truck, which is what I want. All right, I am very impressed with how that turned out. Even if I do say so myself, I'm very happy. It looks like a beaten up old truck still. And I know this is definitely going to be a very controversial episode, because I know so many people are like, you're going to spend all this effort, why not paint it properly? So much more effort to paint it properly. This is still cool and a rough old truck with a little bit of extra added. I wanted to play. I like doing this stuff. As I said, I used to do airbrushing for a living for quite a few years. Now, I have not finished the sides yet. I need to do some sort of lettering on the sides, and I've been throwing up different ideas. I don't necessarily want to just go home built on the side. I need to come up with something, maybe Frankenhauling. I'm not sure what I'm going to write, but I want to have some sort of old lettering on the side. So that's where you guys can help. Any suggestions, I'm happy to consider. I'd love to know what to sort of incorporate in there. I'm also going to match in the lettering that I lost previously. I'm going to paint that in, so don't worry about that. It's all to come next time. So please let me know what you think. You love it, you hate it, whatever. Let me know. And with that, I think it means it's time for Fun Facts with Mrs. Jeff.
Hey guys, at the end of 1957, Ford announced the second generation of the Thunderbird. The first generation had proven successful against its rival, the Corvette, but after Ford conducted some surveys, they introduced significant changes for the second generation. Notably, 2 rear seats were added, along with luxury features previously only available in full-size cars. As a result, sales soared, and the new model dramatically expanded the luxury car market, winning Motor Trend Car of the Year in 1958. The Thunderbird was offered as a 2-door coupe or a convertible, and it was initially powered by a 5.8-litre V8. But this was then replaced in 1959 with Ford's new 345 horsepower 7-litre V8. Over the 4 years of the second generation's run, Ford sold almost 200,000 T-Birds.
All right, I'm very happy with the result of the truck. It's now still looking like an old rusty truck, but it doesn't have my repair patches on it. And yeah, some of this sort of stuff at the front, I don't know, it still looks like it's painted, but yeah, it's growing on me. I'm liking it. Definitely want your suggestions though on the lettering on the sides of what I should write. Let me know. That's what I'm going to be tackling next week.
Sign writing?
Yes.
Yes, Jeff's very good at that.
But old sign writing.
Yes, he's very good at that. All right, well.
Because I'm old.
Like, subscribe, of course, and Patreon if you want to help Jeff out and see the videos there and if no ads. I think that's it.
That's it?
That's
All
it.
right. See you guys.
Hey guys. Had proven successful against its rival, the Corvette. But after Ford conducted surveys, they then introduced new changes to the new Thunderbird. They went on to introduce new changes for the second generation.
Changes,
Significant.
Yeah.
What did I say?
You said new changes.
You're right. That's like saying ATM machine, and you hate that. I was just going to do the whole lot then, and you just interrupted me. I was ready to.
Shut up. Such a liar.
And the new car dramatically expanded the luxury motor trade,
No.
winning Motor Car Trend of the Year in 1950. As a result, sales soared and the winning Motor Car Trend of...
Motor trend.
Okay. Whew. Pay. The Thunderbird was offered...
Yes.